I remember that morning clearly. I'd baked 2 tins of cinnamon cookies, still warm, and tucked a folder of old photos under my arm. Pictures I thought my son Evan and my grandson Noah might use for their Christmas cards. I even hummed on the drive, light as air. On the porch, the wreath was tilted. Out of habit, I reached to fix it. My hand stopped halfway. From inside, Evan's voice cut clean through the door. God, why is Eileen even still alive? I just don't get it. No warning. No soft landing. A slap I never saw coming. My breath caught. Alive. From my own boy. The child I carried through fevers and through the funeral of his wife. A woman's laugh followed. Tight. Polite. Not his late wife. Someone I didn't know. My fingers curled back from the wreath. I'm Eileen Margaret Callahan, 72, a widow for 11 years, living alone in a small town in Oregon. A mother, a grandmother. Though in that moment, I wasn't sure those words still fit. I stepped down the stairs slowly, relearning how to carry my own weight. And that's the moment I knew. Something in me had been fading for years, but not anymore. He said it like a shrug. Why is she even still alive? But the truth is, I'd been fading from his world long before those words were spoken. After his wife died, suddenly, during that awful winter 5 years ago, I moved into their house. No one asked. I just went. Someone had to do the laundry. Someone had to pack lunches, scrub bottles, and pick Noah up from daycare. And Evan? He was unraveling. Not in the way people notice, but in quiet ways. Misplacing keys, staring too long at nothing, forgetting to eat. I held that house together for 10 months. Held him together. I did it because I loved them. Because I thought that's what mothers do. Step in, clean up, carry the grief no one else knows how to touch. When things began to steady, when Noah started sleeping through the night again, when Evan stopped losing weight, I was asked to take a step back. Give us a little more space, Mom. So I did. Then 1 week became a month became a season. Then one day the spare key no longer worked. No call, no explanation, just a lock that didn't turn. I told myself they were healing, that this was part of the process, that I wasn't being pushed out, just released. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. And I wasn't released. I was erased. The signs had been there. Last fall I brought over soup when Evan had the flu. He didn't answer the door. Texted me later. We're good, Mom. Thanks, though. On Noah's birthday last year, I gave him a hand-bound sketchbook. He smiled politely. Said thanks. I found it in the hallway closet 3 months later, still wrapped under a box of Christmas lights. Tiny rejections dressed in civility, gratitude that never touched the eyes. I sat at the kitchen table, same spot where I once braided Noah's hair while he coloured, where I clipped coupons, filled pillboxes, wrote birthday cards I wasn't sure would be opened. And I thought. I stepped in when their world collapsed. And now I'm a crack in the floor they step over. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity, clean clarity that made the air feel sharper. I stood up, opened the cabinet, pulled out the file labelled legal. Inside, power of attorney papers, will drafts, a deed. My name still sat on line after line, but not for long. And this time, that decision would be mine. That day, the law office still smelled like copy paper and tired carpet, same ceiling fan, same receptionist with the tight bun. Richard Brody had been our family's attorney for more than 30 years. Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Brody said, rising from behind his desk. It's been years. 11, I said, sitting. Since Frank passed. He nodded slowly. You said this isn't urgent. But personal? Yes, I replied. And overdue. He pulled out a notepad, yellow legal pad, mechanical pencil. He used to joke that pens were for people who didn't believe in second thoughts. I'd like to update my will, I said. He raised an eyebrow. You want to change beneficiaries? I want to revoke the current one completely and start fresh. Completely? He asked. I leaned in. Evan Callahan is no longer to receive anything under my name. No house, no savings, no accounts. Nothing is held jointly. Nothing is held in trust. Nothing in case of emergency. Nothing. Mr. Brody was quiet. Not surprised, just careful. That's entirely within your rights, he said. You're of sound mind. Your assets are yours to direct. I'll draft a new will and include a formal revocation clause to nullify the previous one. Make sure the language is clear, I added. No ambiguity. I don't want anyone interpreting my intent after I'm gone. He nodded, scribbled. What about your power of attorney? Evan still holds medical and financial decision-making authority. Revoke that too. There was a pause, not resistance, just respect. Anyone you'd like to assign in his place? Not yet, I said. I'll retain it myself for now. When the time comes, I'll decide. He started gathering papers. Anything else? I took a deep breath. Yes. I'd like to establish a fund, a small one, for educational aid, specifically for students over 50 returning to school. Name it after my late husband, the Frank Callahan Memorial Fund. He looked up, genuinely moved. You've thought this through. Not until recently, I said, but now, yes. Very clearly. As I stood to leave, he handed me a folder. It'll take a week or so. I'll call you when it's ready for signature. One more thing, I added at the door. Remove Evan as my emergency contact at the hospital. From all files. If I fall and no one's there to catch me, let the floor do what it will. Outside, the wind was colder than it looked, but I didn't shiver. Because this time I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward myself. I started with the phone. I opened my contacts and scrolled past names I hadn't called in years, some because they'd passed, some because the friendship had simply withered. And there it was. Son, Evan, cell. It stared back at me like a door that had been locked from the other side for years. I used to keep that number saved for emergencies. If I collapsed, if I forgot which way home was, if I simply needed a voice that knew me. But I never called, not once. I just kept it there, to pretend someone still would come if I ever did. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to delete this contact?" I whispered, "No." But I'm going to. And I tapped delete. Next was the drawer beside the fridge, my emergency drawer. It held my insurance card, a copy of my will, a printed medication list, and a post-it with Evan's number. Underneath it, in my handwriting, in case something happens. I used to think it was wise to be prepared. Now, I wonder if I was just clinging to a fantasy that he'd still show up if the worst happened. But if I collapsed tomorrow, I'm not sure he'd even pick up. Or worse, he might, and feel nothing. So I gathered it all, every emergency plan I'd written around his name, and burned them in the sink. The ashes rose like white petals, soft and silent. And strangely, I didn't feel any lighter. Frank once told me I had a rescue bone. He said it with a smile, like it was something sweet about me. Now I wonder if it was a warning. I've spent a lifetime holding people up who stopped holding me in return. I went down to the basement. I sat on the bottom step and looked at the boxes I'd labelled over the years. Evan, baby years, Noah, preschool drawings, family, Christmas, wedding, no year. I didn't need one. I remembered the day perfectly. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was inside, because I was the one who had saved each piece when no one else thought to. The morning of Evan's wedding, I was folding napkins in the kitchen while he tried to tie his tie. He looked nervous, like a boy wearing shoes that were too big. I kissed his cheek and said, "You're going to be a good husband." He didn't meet my eyes, just muttered, "I hope so." And I remember thinking, he still needs me, but maybe he didn't. Or maybe he did, but only until he didn't anymore. That's the part I keep circling back to. That I gave, and when the crisis ended, I was asked, gently, politely, to disappear. The next morning, I had the locks changed. The young man who did the job didn't ask why. Maybe he saw this sort of thing all the time. I nearly said, "My son used to have a key." But I stopped myself, because saying it out loud would sound like I still expected him to use it. And I don't. Not anymore. That night I made tea and sat on the porch wrapped in an old blanket. The air was brisk but not unfriendly. I looked at the garden, the dark shapes of trees, the swing Noah used to love, still crooked from last summer's storm. And I told myself, not in words but in the stillness of knowing, I'm not cutting him out. I'm just letting myself go free. And that's not the same thing for the first time in a long while. I believed it. The knock was soft, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, Evan stood there, hands jammed into his coat pockets, shoulders tight like a boy about to explain a broken window. "Hey, Mom," he said. His voice was careful, like he wasn't sure how welcome he'd be. I stepped aside, my hand still on the door. "Come in, Evan," I said. He crossed the threshold, then paused. His eyes fell to the shiny brass deadbolt. "You changed the locks?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "When?" "Last month." His mouth opened, then closed. Inside my head, the thought came anyway. When the key starts feeling like an open invitation to disappointment, you change the lock. He followed me to the kitchen. "I was going to call," he said, trailing after me, "but figured I'd surprise you." Surprise? The last surprise was Christmas 4 years ago. He and Noah with a store-bought pie, eaten on the couch because the dining table was covered in laundry I'd been folding alone. That was the year dropping by replaced spending time. I set a second cup of tea on the table. "Well, here you are," I said. His eyes landed on the manila envelope by the fruit bowl. He picked it up without asking. "What's this?" he asked. I didn't answer, just kept stirring my tea. The papers slid out. Revocation of his inheritance, sale of the back lot, confirmation of the scholarship fund. I watched his eyes track the words back and forth. "You're selling the land?" he said finally. "Already did," I replied. "The one for Noah." "Grandma's lot?" I nodded. My grandson hadn't set foot on that patch of grass in 5 years. "You took me off the will?" he asked, his voice tightening. "Yes." "Mum, what the hell?" "Where is this coming from?" he demanded. "It's been coming for a long time, Evan," I said. "Is this about the cookies?" he asked, almost scoffing. Cookies? The tray I brought to his house, left untouched while he and Noah watched a game in the other room. I'd driven an hour with those cookies, thinking I'd stay for dinner. I was back home in 40 minutes. "This isn't about cookies," I said quietly. "It's about years." "Years of what?" he asked. "Of being optional," I replied. He shook his head, letting out a short, humorless laugh. "I don't get it. You're acting like I abandoned you," he said. Acting. As if the empty chair at Thanksgiving, the unanswered texts on Mother's Day, and the quiet birthdays were props I staged for effect. "I'm not acting," I said. "I'm just done pretending it's not happening." "Pretending what?" "That I have my own life? That Noah's busy?" he asked. "Pretending that's the whole story," I said. Evan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Mum, you're overreacting. It's dramatic. You can't just cut your own son out over feelings." "Feelings?" I repeated, letting the words settle. "No, Evan. Over the years of what?" he shot back. "I've been working. I've been raising Noah. That's not abandonment, that's life." "Life," I said, nodding slowly. "But life didn't stop you from posting vacation photos online. It didn't stop you from taking Noah to the movies. It didn't stop you from making time for everything except me." He frowned. "You act like I never come by." "You don't," I said simply. "Last time was 10 months ago. Before that it was, 2 birthdays ago?" "I call," he said, leaning forward. "Once a month," I replied, meeting his eyes. "If that. And half those calls end with, 'I've got to run.'" He leaned back, shaking his head. "I didn't know you kept score." "It's not a score," I said. "It's a pattern." You're making it sound like I'm a bad son. I'm making it sound like I'm not in your life, I said quietly. Not really. He laughed once sharply. So what? I lose the land, the house, everything because I didn't visit enough? No, I said. You lose them because you didn't value them while you had them. Because I've decided to give what I have to people and places that show up. For a moment he was silent. Then, is this about money? Do you need help? Because I shook my head. If it were about money, it would be easy. This is about showing up for someone before it's too late. You make it sound like you're dying, he said, almost irritated. We're all dying, Evan, I replied. Some of us just stop waiting to be remembered before it happens. Inside, I wanted to say more. About the Thanksgiving dinners I ate alone, the birthdays where my phone stayed silent, the way Noah's hugs became handshakes without him noticing. But I knew if I handed him my loneliness like evidence, he'd just cross-examine it until it disappeared. So instead, I said, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to save myself. He stared at me, jaw tight. You're still my mom. And you're still my son, I said. But being my son isn't a lifetime pass. It's a role you have to keep choosing. You stopped choosing love isn't a title you keep. It's something you show over and over, or it fades into a story people used to tell about you. I didn't say it out loud, but I hoped, somehow, he'd carry it with him when he walked out the door. Hi, Grandma. My grandson Noah was there, backpack hanging off one shoulder, his hair sticking up in the back like he'd taken off a hat too fast. Come in, sweetheart, I said, holding the door wider. The moment he stepped inside, he took a deep breath. It smells like cookies in here, he said, kicking off his sneakers. Wait, are those your cookies? They are, I smiled, still warm. Best day ever, he declared, dropping his backpack in the corner. He climbed into his usual chair at the table, legs swinging, and reached for a cookie. When he bit into it, he closed his eyes like it was the best thing he'd eaten all week. Perfect, he mumbled through a mouthful. I laughed softly, passing him a napkin. After a while, he said, Dad looked kind of grumpy when he drove off. Did you two fight? We just talked, I said gently. He nodded like he understood, then changed the subject. Remember when you came to my soccer game and it was freezing, so you brought that giant thermos of hot chocolate? My friends still talk about that. They said you're the coolest grandma they did, huh? I chuckled. Yup, I told them. She's not just cool, she's mine. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but before I could say anything, he added, I'm sorry I don't come more. Sometimes I forget, but not because I don't want to. I brushed a crumb from his cheek and said softly, I know, honey. I know I'll try harder, he said, looking me straight in the eyes, 'cause you're my grandma, and I love you more than cookies. Well, maybe the same as cookies. We both laughed at that. When he left, he hugged me tight, one of those hugs where you can feel the little heartbeat against your chest. Save me some for next time, he called as he ran to the car. The door closed, and for the first time that day, the kitchen didn't feel quite so empty. Sometimes the world softens not through big apologies, but through small, genuine moments that remind us why love is worth holding on to. That afternoon, as the sun started to pour across the linoleum floor, I picked up the phone and called Mr. Brody's office again. He answered after 3 rings. Brody here. I tightened my grip on the receiver. Hi, Mr. Brody. It's Eileen Callahan again. Sorry for the short notice. There are a couple more things I'd like to change. There was a pause, then. Of course, Mrs. Callahan. I assume this is regarding the estate plan we discussed last week? Yes, I replied. I've been thinking more about the land. The back lot behind the house. I'd like to sell it. Another pause. Paper rustled on his end. You're referring to the parcel you and your husband reserved for your grandson? Yes. That's the one. Mr. Brody's voice brought me back. Are you sure you want to let go of that? It was marked for Noah. I gave a dry laugh, my eyes fixed on the crooked porch swing out back. I used to be sure of a lot of things. That he'd grow up nearby, that we'd have Sunday dinners, that Mom still meant something I wrapped my fingers tighter around my teacup. But I don't think anyone's coming back for that land anymore. And I'm done saving space for ghosts. More soft typing on his end. Then, and the fund? You mentioned it last time. The scholarship? Yes, I said slowly. I want to set it up, officially. The Frank Callahan Memorial Fund for Returning Students, he asked. For people over 50, the ones who spent their lives raising others and forgot to raise themselves. I paused, letting the silence breathe. Frank always believed people could begin again, even late, even tired, even alone. And then I remembered something else. The year I tried to sign up for that creative writing course at the public library. I filled out the form, printed it out, and even picked up a notebook. Evan overheard me on the phone and chuckled. "Mom, that's cute. You don't have to impress anyone anymore." Cute, I laughed along, pretended it didn't sting. I folded the paper, put away the pen, and forgot on purpose. Mr. Brody's voice softened. "That's a meaningful legacy, Mrs. Callahan. I think Frank would be proud I looked at the picture of Frank on the kitchen shelf, his warm, forgiving smile holding me steady." "I hope so," I whispered, "because I'm finally doing this for me, not just for them." The next Saturday, Noah showed up at my door without his dad. Just him, backpack slung over one shoulder and a big smile. "You said last time I could help you bake," he reminded me. "I did," I said, stepping aside. "Come on in, chef." The kitchen filled with the sound of clinking bowls and the warm smell of butter and sugar. Noah stood on the little wooden stool I'd kept since Evan was a boy, sleeves rolled up past his elbows. "Why are we making so many cookies?" he asked, glancing at the growing trays. "Because we're taking them to the library fundraiser," I said. "They're raising money for new books. And next week I'm meeting with my lawyer to set up a scholarship fund." He looked up at me. "Like, for kids to go to school?" "Exactly. Kids who need a little help to get there." He was quiet for a moment, carefully spooning dough onto the tray. "That's nice," he said finally. "You always do stuff like that." "Not always," I replied, smiling a little. "But I'm trying to do more now." "I think it's cool," he said. "'Cause then it's not just cookies, it's like cookies that do something good." I laughed softly. "Maybe that's the secret to life, Noah, making the things you love help someone else." When the cookies were done, we packed them into tins and tied them with bright ribbons. Noah insisted on writing the labels himself, his crooked handwriting making each one look like a little treasure. Before he left, he turned to me. "Grandma, can I help with the other stuff too?" "Not just cookies? You mean the scholarship?" "Yeah, I want to see the kids who get it. I want to know their names." I felt something warm and steady in my chest. "Then we'll do it together," I said. "Legacy isn't just about what we leave behind, it's about who we bring with us while we're still here." 2 weeks later, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon again. Noah stood on his stool, carefully pressing ribbons onto the tins of cookies we'd baked. Each had his crooked, cheerful handwriting. "Made with Grandma." "Ready?" I asked. "Ready," he grinned, hopping down. The public library was warm when we stepped inside, the air carrying that familiar scent of paper and dust. Sunlight poured across the wooden tables where children sat with books too big for their laps. Mrs. Harris, the head librarian, met us near the front desk. "Eileen," she said, her smile softening, "and this must be Noah." "Yes, ma'am," he said politely, holding out the first tin. "These are for the fundraiser." I handed her a sealed envelope. Her eyes flicked to the name printed across it, Frank Callahan Memorial Scholarship. And for a moment her smile wavered into something wetter, more fragile. "This will help so many children," she whispered. Across the room, Noah was already at the reading corner, offering cookies to a little girl clutching a stack of picture books. Her face lit up. Noah laughed, the sound bright in the quiet space. I watched him there, his small hands, his easy kindness, and felt something loosen in me. Maybe you can't make people stay, but sometimes you can make room for the ones who want to. Noah looked over his shoulder and called, "Grandma, they love them." I smiled. "I know," I said. "That's the point." Life has a way of showing us who's willing to walk beside us and who's already gone ahead without looking back. We can spend years waiting at a door that never opens, or we can turn and find the people who are already there, smiling, holding out their hands. Family isn't just blood. It's the ones who choose you, over and over again. And sometimes, that's all the family you need. So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe to the channel for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.